Hey, everybody. Bo Prosser, Center for Christian Education. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me and my buddy Ruben Swint today. We are going to talk about the thing that you love the most about church work, loving the stewardship season. And I know what you're thinking. Prosser, have you lost what little bit was left of your brain? Well, not really. Ruben has developed some thoughts that we want to bring to you because every year, late fall, uh, early fall, I don't know where on your calendar, uh, but hopefully you're starting work on your stewardship stuff as we move into September. So we wanted to give you some ideas and some thoughts. And as always, I'm gratefully joined by my friend and colleague, Ruben Swint, the generosity guy. So, Ruben, welcome back.
Thank you, Bo. It's good to be back and glad to have this opportunity to talk about stewardship, something that I enjoy talking about and actually practicing.
So you say loving the stewardship season, and while they think I've already lost my mind, I'm going to ask you, have you lost your mind? Is that really something that can happen?
Oh, humans are strange creatures. We can fall in love with anything. Uh, I absolutely love chocolate chip cookies, but today we're talking about something a little more important than that. And this kind of comes from my observations through the years in helping churches plan stewardship approaches. There was always this sense of dread or how do we get through this, or not really excited about taking those steps to make it a really successful experience. And so I've been thinking about that. And I think one of the first things we do is we adjust our attitude. It's going to be creative. It's going to engage our folks. It's going to give us what we want. So why don't we just love it to start with? God loved us while we were yet sinners. So
Right.
same approach.
Now you're calling this the hunt for Green October.
I know. Now, isn't that clever?
That is
The hunt
clever. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that.
Well, towards the end of summer, beginning of fall, into the end of the year, our churches, the traditional churches, many of them, they're trying to accomplish several goals. One is they're trying to catch up from a slump in giving during the summer months. And then the second thing they're doing is they're starting, especially if they have good finance committees, they're starting to put a lot of energy and time and effort into preparing the budget. And then they're thinking about the stewardship program they're going to use that will support that budget, that will get pledges, support, giving for the next year. And they're looking for the best stewardship program. Now, when they say we want the best program out there, most of the time, this is what they're asking for. Very little work, very little cost, maximal results. Let me tell you, that program does not exist. You've got to work for what you want. You've got to invest some dollars to get the results you want. Then they go about implementing the stewardship program. And many of them have a successful campaign, some not what they wanted. They're not still where they need to be, or maybe have been in the past. But here's the interesting thing to me. They do that, and if they do it well, and if they get the results they wanted, then the next year when this cycle comes up, you know what they do? They go look for another stewardship program rather than repeat the one that was successful. And they lose a continuity, and they lose institutional history that way, just going from one to one. It's like designer clothes. What's the designer stewardship program this year? Well, maybe it's the one you had last year with just a few tweaks.
Absolutely.
But that's the hunt for Green October, trying to get all those things accomplished. And you have families, kids are back in school, you have football schedule starting up. You got Advent on the schedule in front of you. So it's kind of compressed, it's intense, and let's just get through this stewardship program and be done with it.
Absolutely.
You gotta love it.
Absolutely.
Gotta love it.
So I did try to love it as a pastoral leader, but as you say, the pastor was already thinking about Advent. The minister of music was knee deep in Christmas music. The education staff were the ones that were looked to design whatever we were going to design, and each year trying to be creative with that. So as we enter into this, I'm gonna be skeptical as to whether you can convince me to love it or not. But I'm gonna say my mind's open. So we'll start there.
Well, kudos to you, Bo. It's good at your advanced age. You're still open to something new. I'm glad to hear that.
So, how do
gets-
you define the word stewardship for congregations?
That's excellent. First of all, you've got to realize where stewardship's been. Stewardship in the early 20th century really meant living a responsible life, being a good Christian, letting one's life speak and be your witness in the world through work, through your neighborhood associations and all. But then about the 1950s, what happened was stewardship became redefined in our churches, and we can thank our denominational leaders for this because that's where it came from. Stewardship began to be defined essentially as fundraising to support the annual budget. They didn't use those words, but that's what they meant. We are going to have a stewardship program for you, and it revolved entirely around pledging the budget, which from those decades forward really meant the budget became a false god in church life. Stewardship is much more than pledging your budget. In fact, I'd say it has nothing to do with pledging your budget.
It for sure became a false metric. Maybe not a false god, but for sure a false metric. And so between the Old Testament understanding of giving 10% of first fruits and denominational entities saying stewardship means pledging your budget, if we look a little deeper into the New Testament, what does the New Testament bring to us?
Well, in the New Testament, when the word stewardship, oikonomia in Greek, when that word appears, the context surrounding it is the kingdom of God. So the basic New Testament definition is stewardship is what we do with who we are and what we have to usher in the kingdom, to affect the communities in which we live, to provide a witness of a loving God. Stewardship is being a gospel manager. That's what the New Testament would tell us most of the time that word is used. Now, you can go and Google stewardship without the Christian adjective to it, and you'll see a whole host of definitions that have to do with how you treat fundraising gifts, with how you treat nature, with how you treat your own career path, all of those things. But when it's the word Christian is added to it, then you're talking about how do we invest ourselves as gospel managers using all the gifts we have with all the opportunities that present themselves.
I love that. I love that idea. Number one, it takes the guilt away because there are a bunch of people in today's world that can't do 10%. And then they feel guilty about it. And then they say, well, since I can't do 10%, I won't do anything. But what you're doing is really reframing stewardship to more a generosity approach. And you and I both agree generosity is the way to make all this happen.
Right. Exactly. Now, stewardship, the nature of that word reflects a position, if you will. That's a role or an assignment. And the assignment is from God, and the accountability built into that assignment refers back to God. So we are gospel managers. We're kind of middle managers, if you will. God's in the C-level suite. And then we're trying to handle all these resources and push them out where they're needed. It's doing all we do with all we have to accomplish our purpose unto God and our congregation's assignment from God. That's what stewardship is to me.
Okay, so as we go into this hunt for Green October, we're challenging people to lean into their own generosity. But what do we do about goal setting? How do we define what we're about? If it's not just raising the budget, what are our goals?
That's the way to start. What is it you're trying to achieve, and how are you going to measure that to know that you've achieved it? So, what kind of goals could you actually set while you're trying to love the stewardship season? I think one goal needs to be focused on relationships. Is there a possibility in what we do over a multi-week period of time that we can strengthen the relationships in our church? How can we do that? How can we do that effectively, where people feel like they're valued, that they are known, and that they can play a meaningful part in this congregation, regardless of what their giving may be? So that's that. The second thing I think we can set as a goal is, how do we expand the idea of giving beyond just monetary gifts? Can we, in fact, encourage people to dedicate a percentage of their time to serve through the church, or maybe even with church-affiliated institutions or agencies? Is there somebody who is especially gifted who just hasn't been found yet by the committee on committees to be asked to give their gift in terms of what they can do? I think what we really need to do is focus on pulling together a group of people who are not financial people and say to these folks, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to celebrate our mission. We're trying to gather all kinds of resources to carry that out for next year. How would you go about this? And don't let the very good financial people who are good at managing a budget, don't let them be responsible also for the stewardship season, because it's a different skill set and it's a different approach that's needed.
Well, and we're teaching generosity as a year-round event. We're inviting people to be generous with us in every corner of the church calendar. The financial people co-opt that during September, October to giving to the church budget. Right. So what does the team then look like? If we say we're going to teach generosity and we're going to invite people into a relationship of generosity, and we're going to have a couple of goals, one of them being to pledge the church budget or close to the church budget, what does the team look like as we begin to enter into this hunt for Green October?
Well, I think the team needs to reflect the diversity in your congregation, so that everybody in the congregation, when they look at that team, can find someone like them. Then if I did have a bias for the team, I would bias towards the younger generation. I would, because I'm there, an older generation person, I would take folks like me for granted, because we've been in this process for decades. Really, regardless of the stewardship appeal or emphasis, we're going to give, we're going to fill out a card, we're going to turn it in. That's what we do. And the reason is because of the generation before us, the builders. They showed us how to do that. But this younger generation did not have the learning opportunities, if they grew up in church, that were available to my generation. The church training component of many churches just went away. Sunday night at church gave way to Sunday night at the soccer fields. So we just have a generation that we need to involve and engage. And I believe the best way you learn is to put somebody in charge. Let them be the ones responsible. Then you've got their attention. They start thinking about it. They think about it in terms of their generational values. And you come out with something that may not appeal to the older folks. But I will tell you, as an older person, I'm going to be excited all the way down to my tippy toes to see young adults being excited about stewardship and putting on their program. Because then I know the church has a future. It's going to move forward.
So, do we really need a theme? Can't we just say we're in the hunt for a green October and have a submarine with the thermometer that shows our budget and pledges and let that be done? Have we outpaced stewardship themes at this point in our church lives?
You know, I've worked with a few churches that are countercultural enough that they would take the theme of Hunt for Green October and run with it, just to be different, just to be against culture, just to say, all right, this is really what we're after. And they would have a great time of it. I think what a theme does is it allows a reframing of your church's mission for a new year. You constantly need to be talking about your mission and what God's called you to do. At the same time, feeding back, these are the results of what we invest in our mission. But that mission, if you only talk about it one way and only one way all the time, it gets a little stale. So this is not necessarily a stewardship theme as much as it is reframing your mission, who we are, what we're called to do, and what we need to go forward in the world to accomplish that.
You have a visual for us?
Yeah, I wanted to share with you a visual. Now, this was a church I was a member of, and we came up with a stewardship theme. And let me tell you, this was a tried and true mainline denominational church who had their tradition of doing this their way all the time. And they did a good job. So, you know, I was a Baptist in the group. It wasn't a Baptist church. And I kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. So we came up with a theme called We Journey Together. And let me just ask you to think about that thing. We journey together. It's us together. We're on a journey. We're living our lives through this church and in our families. And we're doing it together. And that's what I would call a great example of an anti-institutional approach. In other words, we're not trying to save the church. We're not trying to pledge the budget. We're trying to carry out what we believe is right with God's help and move forward. So let me share what we came up with as a visual. We came up with a tree of life.
Wow. Excellent.
And as you see at the bottom here, there are all the inputs. There are the roots that are gathering nutrients down here. Tithes and contributions, volunteer hours, capital campaign gifts, member skills, prayers, passion, Lena's Place donations, bequests, special offerings, designated major gifts, all the kinds of inputs we get for carrying out our mission. And then you get to the trunk, and that's where it's processed, if you will. That's the factory right there. And this turns into things that are essentially within the walls of the church. It's those Christian formation activities that we carry out, if not weekly, then regularly, every year. And finally, you see the results. This is the fruit of all the ministries that are served beyond the church through member time, member talent, and member gifts. So I found this to be extremely helpful in getting away from a pledging the budget approach and saying, this is how we take care of mission. We contribute all these inputs through the roots of our congregation. We process them through our regular activities, and they yield many opportunities for mission and ministry beyond our particular congregation.
Excellent. So
now let me say this and then we'll pick up.
Sure.
We Journey Together resonated so well with that congregation that it continued to be a way the church talked about itself from that point forward. It was a reframing of mission. It no longer was we a a congregation of the UCC. We are on a journey together.
That's excellent. And even though I will apologize for some of the themes that I may have dreamed up through the years, having that theme does reflect the mission, or should reflect the mission, and build the community within the church as you're all pulling together, forming and reforming and moving along the same lines. Oftentimes, the stewardship push is in competition with other ministries or other programs going on at the same time. And what you did in that visual is show everything working together from the ground up, actually from below the ground, to bring fruit. So you're building community of the church. You are through a theme, I think, lowering the temperature, if you will, of the annual stewardship program, making it a little more kinder and gentler approach as we move together. I love that word, together. And you also, at least for me, there was a spiritual dimension included. So I really like the idea of theme, and I really like the idea of visuals. We are definitely a visual society, and we also are a storytelling society. So somewhere in there's going to have to be some storytelling around what we're doing.
That's right. That's right. And because of the impact of visuals, just to move back a topic or two, on that stewardship team, place visual artists, graphic designers, people that can translate this message into images that have impact.
So understanding that it is a pleasure to join in this hunt for Green October so that we can love it, not detest it, or just get through it, that we have a goal. We set the goal. Some churches even set 2 or 3 goals for their budget pledging. A team is developed for people who can work the generosity wheel, if you will, as a year-round process. And there's also a theme involved to engage everyone to join with you in the process. So when we come together next time, we're going to start with the giving path. You're going to outline for us a way to begin that path, and then you're going to take us through some of the other dimensions in this hunt for Green October. Thanks, Ruben, for your insights and for your passion around this. This is Bo Prosser, Center for Christian Education. We'll see you next week.